Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Great. Yeah, so thank you so much for the invite. I'm happy to see international students all together. I will say that we we tried to meet a lot when we were studying at NYU with all the internationals, and of course, always looking for events. But I have followed the social media, and you guys are having a blast. I think you guys are very organized and having a lot of events. So congratulations. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about a little bit about my personal background. I studied architecture in Mexico. I am from Monterrey, Mexico. It's the northeast of Mexico. It's 2 hours from Texas, which is kind of like the fourth largest economy in the U.S. And when I was there, I studied architecture thinking to be an urban planner in our countries. One career can be very general in terms of like an architect can do urban planning, but also can do residential design, industrial design, and so on. So I was very curious about urban planning, so I started an internship at the city planning department. And when I was there, I noticed, of course, that was my passion, not only designing one residential home or one office building, but kind of designing the environment and designing how I wanted to kind of like designing the quality of life I was looking for. And that means a walkable city or where you have open space, parks. So that you can have a really good amenities very close to where you live, where you work, where you play, and all of that. So after the architecture career, started in city planning departments. I was there like for 4 years. And then I say like, okay, this is great, but I need a boost in my career. So I applied for a multilateral organization, which is the Inter-American Development Bank. And I was consultant for one initiative that it was called the Emerging and Resilient Cities. So yeah, I was there, and that boosted my career because I was getting notice from the city department again, and they. So while I was a consultant for the Inter-American Development Bank, working with different cities in Mexico, I received a call from one person in the municipality where I used to work, and they asked me like, "Hey, now we have the city planning department position open. Will you be interested in coming back to the position?" Right. So I started as an intern, and they were offering now the directorship. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I just left like 1 year ago, and now they want me like for the highest position. So I think one of the interesting things there is how I left the comfort zone. I was kind of looking for different opportunities, and found this one in the Inter-American Development Bank, right? So then moved back to the city planning department. I was there for a while, and I noticed in these basically national conventions for city planning departments that maybe I was able to make more impact by creating a consulting firm and helping many cities instead of just working for that specific city. So I quit it and I started my consulting firm. So we work with states, local governments, academia. And then I got married, and my wife, during the honeymoon trip, she asked me like, "Hey, what if, will it matter if I apply for masters in the U.S.?" We were in the plane, and I was like, "Now?" She was like, "Yeah, but we're about to get like," it was the flight to the honeymoon, and she was like, yeah, let's, I'm interested in doing a master's. So I was like, okay, yeah, why not, right? So yeah, she got accepted. So this is all before my NYU experience. I'm gonna get there. So basically, we came here to the U.S., to New York, and I was like, okay, I have this great experience. I was already city planning department for this city, so it should be fine, right? Like I will get a job, it will be great, that's it. And of course, New York is a good leveler. Like you can be whatever you want. Then you arrive to New York and it's like, okay, so now we're all equal. Like, yeah, it's kind of like you level your expectations and it hits hard, New York. And then once you are able to, yeah, kind of like level up, you're going to start enjoying the city. But anyways, the thing is, I arrived, I got a temporary job. They were paying me $15 the hour. And it was in an organization that was organizing the Smart Cities New York event. So I was like, well, I'm still kind of connected to the urban planning and all of that. So I was there, but I realized that it was going to be impossible for me to have a professional life here without a solid education in New York, and especially, so I look at the best programs for urban planners, found NYU, apply, and I think one of the most interesting things during my 2 years at the Masters, it was that I never had like I was like, okay, I started as the one track in that moment. It was infrastructure, transportation, and environment. And suddenly I was like, wait, should I change to economic development? So I always knew that it was urban planning, but I was doubting about the different tracks. So I had some interesting internships. But the most interesting part is when I graduated in 2020. As you know, 2020, middle of the pandemic. Well, like, okay, I spent 2 years, I have debts, I have this. So I was like, what am I going to do now? I need to stay in the US to pay those debts because I'm going to be earning in dollars. I will be paying my debts in dollars. And I was like, okay, if I am interested in transportation right now is all closed, right? So there is no movement. So I had previous experiences with economic development. I was like, okay, right now is the time where cities need a boost on economic development, not only because of economic development per se, but talking about small businesses. Small businesses are important for the quality of life that we were just saying, right? Like you walk a street, and as Jane Jacobs will say, if there is people in the street, you will feel safe. If there are restaurants, you will be able to eat there, have dinner. So basically enjoy the city. So small businesses and especially storefronts are really important for the city in that specific stuff, but also because they provide employment. I think 80% of businesses in the US are small businesses. So that's money for families. So I was like, okay, this is really important. So I pivot from transportation, environment, infrastructure to economic development, and I apply to the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. So you will say like, okay, urban planner working for a Chamber of Commerce, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So I was there, and part of our job, I was convincing myself that I was like, okay, I'm doing community engagement because I'm going door by door, talking to business owners, and asking them how are they doing, what type of help they need. And basically my job was, after the interview, say like, okay, they need help with this type of financing or help with some legal issues. So I will connect them to different resources, federal, state, local resources. And as I was walking the streets, I was like, okay, how can I create more impact? I mean, I'm creating impact already, great. But think further as an urban planner and say like, okay, there's a lot of vacancy, but I am not noticing that vacancy like spread it equally. There were like some spots that were particularly more vacant than others. So I was like, okay, you know what? I have my cell phone here. So I'm going to be tracking, recording these vacancies in the storefronts. And then let's see what I'm gonna do with the data, right? So I started to record. So I was walking, okay, 489 Broadway is vacant, whatever, 900 Amsterdam is vacant. I was assigned to the Upper West Side, that's why Broadway, Amsterdam, Columbus. So then I got the data. I was like, okay, I map it. We're like, okay, this is interesting. Now I can see that these are some clusters that are, that are more evident than others. And I remember in one class, we discussed about Jon Snow, and not the Game of Thrones one. Jon Snow, this guy in England that mapped the cholera outbreak, and he noticed that all the particular cases were happening in one street, in one corner, in one pump of water. So this was the first experience where mapping and health issues were correlated and basically say like, okay, you know, where's the problem here? So it's this water pump if all the cases are closed, right? So I say like, okay, maybe I can do something similar. So I have the vacancy rates. So I'm gonna start mixing the information with several elements, right? Of course, vacancy could be because of e-commerce or stuff that were already happening. But I say like, let me mix it with zoning, for example. Let me mix it with if those businesses are within a business improvement district or outside of a business improvement district. And by business improvement districts, probably you all know, but in case someone doesn't, are these geographic areas where all the businesses organize, they pay an extra tax for them to clean it, make it more beautiful, but basically to organize all the different aspects of the district. So it was very surprising because all the 52% of the vacancy rate was concentrated in one area that was zoned for a specific purpose, and this zoning were requiring stores to be enormous, and were requiring only certain type of uses, such as banks, such as big stores. So I was like, of course, I mean, if banks are national brands, they have different places, of course they will say like, let's close these 2 or 3 places because I have so many others that are covering. So that was really interesting. And the other aspect, it was that inside the business improvement districts, the vacancy rates were lower. So it was around 12% lower than other areas. And that, I assume that is because if they are organized, they can share resources, right? Hey, you need legal support? I have a lawyer. You need, I don't know, X or Y. I have these resources. So it was really interesting. And I presented these results to my manager. And she was like, okay, this is great. We closed it. It was it. But I used the information to get my next job at James Lima Planning and Development. Really interesting projects. I'm just gonna skip that part too. Then move to Ford Economy, where I am right now. Really interesting projects too. But when I was at Ford Economy, I contacted the Department of City Planning, and I told them like, hey, I know that you are changing zoning right now. I want to show you this interesting study that I did. So they look at it, and they were like, okay, so you know what? Right now we're changing zoning. The City of Yes program for economic development, we are going to do these changes, so thank you so much for this. So I don't know, I felt that I created impact years after I did this study that nobody asked me to. But the thing is, sometimes, and what I can learn from here and share this experience is that one thing helped me, in that moment helped me to get the other job, because that was the only example I used as a professional life to get. So I was applying for urban planning and economic development, and I only had connecting businesses to resources, but I had these maps, I had this information that was relevant, so that's how I got the other job. And then years after, it was interesting because the impact that probably I didn't create in that moment because it wasn't relevant in that moment. The city was doing emergency response. They were not thinking on zoning. Years later, it was really relevant, and it's something that it's gonna hopefully prepare the city for future shocks and all of that, changing the zoning. So really interesting in terms of urban planning how zoning can impact the life directly. Yeah, that's one example that I wanted to share, and I will leave until here my first participation. So thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.